I'll talk about it.
Going live. Hi, welcome everybody. I'm joined here with Jamie Hart and Mark Hodnott, and talking about the foundation that was created on behalf of Richard McAdam. Mark, you talk about it?
Yes, thanks, Millbilly. Thank you for inviting me in. This foundation was the initial brainchild of Richard's aunt, Shari, who we know of course, and Uncle Greg. They asked me, could I offer some advice about what we might do? So the principal driving force was to create something that was a legacy for all the amazing work that Richard had done. And we thought about it long and hard, and we felt that the enthusiasm Richard showed and the encouragement that he gave others to speak out, including myself, probably all of us here actually, and many others, was really the abiding, if you like, legacy of Richard's time. And so we thought that could be best demonstrated into creating a foundation whereby we would, within that, create scholarships to encourage other people to speak out about matters of injustice and wrongful convictions, or whatever it is that is important to them to make for a better community. So that was the driving force behind it. With a lot of these things, it's really important to not to overcomplicate it so it becomes a burden for someone to manage. So we've created modest expectations about the foundation, which I'll explain to you in a moment.
Right.
But the goal is that we're accepting donations and other sorts of material support to create scholarships, which we've kind of set ourselves a target of 5 a year, but it could be more, could be less, depends, whereby we provide broadcast equipment, be they microphones, cameras, green screens, or whatever is deemed to be appropriate for someone starting up wanting to have a go at speaking out to hear their voice. So we're going to provide the actual dollars to purchase those things. We may well, of course, get some support from some manufacturers in that as well, but we'll see. And in addition to that, through the pool of talented people that in many ways was inspired by Richard, as and when needed and as and when appropriate, we'll call upon that pool of people, mentors we've called them, people that we know within the MAM community, to guide someone in a particular area. So maybe we have a successful applicant who's won the scholarship but would like some advice about setting up their equipment, or they would like to have a better understanding of the legal system, or they would like to understand how to best present themselves physically, and the use of words and language and so on, so that we're trying to guide them in a system that enables them to be the best presenter they can be. So we've all got some level of experience. We're not all perfect by a long shot, but in the collective, we certainly have a pool of resource that we can add to those people's comfort, if you like, because it's a bit of a scary experience to start with for a lot of people. We're all a bit reluctant to do it. But if we can, over time, generate, the numbers of people we're talking about to, and perhaps more, to participate in having a respectful, thoughtful, intelligent public voice, not just a ranter. We don't want ranters. We want people who want to do the homework and research and be a good listener. Then we think that's the best way to honour our friend Richard and all the work he did during the very brief time that we've all known him, or at least, us outsiders who've known him. So that's the kind of the core thrust of the foundation. I'm sorry. We do actually have on the website, people can go and have a look at it. It's trmaf.org. There is some small token merchandise on there. They're really just little things to enable people to have a bit of fun if they want to purchase some small things. They all add to the pool. Perhaps I should also explain to you how the foundation works from a legal perspective.
Mhm.
So the foundation is under the primary care of Richard's aunt, Shari.
Mhm.
We set up a bank account specifically to receive the funds. So when you're donating to the foundation, you're donating to a bank account that's in Shari's name, a unique bank account that I also have access to
Mhm.
see the transactions. And in fact, I see the donations come through to me before they even get to the bank account. When I say see them, I don't physically see any money, but I see the people making the donation and who it is and
Mhm.
how much. So, and I'm a financial person bound by all sorts of codes of conduct, etc. So I'm acting as, if you like, the overview person to make sure everything happens properly, and which of course we fully expect it would.
Mhm.
And as and when people make donations, we acknowledge them via reply email to those people. The donations, of course, in terms of who gives them and how much, is entirely private and confidential.
Mhm.
That's the way they're given. But we will, without mentioning names, we will, for the sake of full disclosure, at the end of probably each year, give an overview of how the foundation has gone, what money's raised, what we've spent our money on. But I fully expect, subject to the applicant's consent, that we will, as and when scholarships are actually awarded, we will announce those if they're happy to announce that, and give people a human touch to the process along the way. So I'm comfortable with the process. It's not complicated. It's pretty easy to manage. It honors Richard's legacy, and hopefully will bear out, some little Richards, dare I say.
Mhm.
And I think it's a good opportunity to show our love and affection for him in a way that is meaningful.
Mhm. I agree. Like
Absolutely.
he inspired me to start making videos myself. So hopefully,
Yes.
I've obviously inspired other people because I've seen there are some people out there that are on the other side of the fence, and they don't do any research whatsoever and just run their mouth.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to point out, oh, a documentary. You got to go beyond the documentary if you want to even get, because the documentary doesn't even scratch the surface of corruption. The more I read, the more I just can't believe what. But yeah.
So, Mark, a couple of quick questions as far as the foundation goes.
Yes.
Um, is that going to be worldwide, where the donation or where the scholarships would go? It could be Australia, it could be Africa. Whoever applies, it doesn't matter country. Are
No,
they?
it does. You're quite right. It can be, anyone can apply from any location in the world. There is an application process that will be vetted once someone makes an application. But anyone can apply. Anyone can be successful, subject to resources and what they say in their application. And yes, so it's truly universal.
And is it going to be? Are you guys looking for students, like high school students, or is it going to be college students? I mean,
Anybody?
I'm assuming it's kind of wide open, really.
Yeah, to be honest, if it was just for high school students and college students, none of us would have probably got involved in
Sure.
if this existed during our time. We say it's open to everyone. Clearly, we would like to have a mix. We would like some young voices, whether they're at high school
Mm-hmm.
or college. We're happy to hear older voices. We all mature into ourselves, and later years, sometimes we're better at being ourselves when we're 50 plus than we were when we were 25 or 30. But and because we've become comfortable with who we are and how we think. So we're not going to, if you like, narrow the potential pool. Anyone who's enthusiastic enough to apply will be eligible for being considered for a scholarship.
Sure. No, and you brought up something really good there, in a roundabout way. But when you look at how we all ended up here with Making a Murderer, but then look at what Rich got into with the Eagle Nation cycles. You know, he was starting to branch out with Scott Davis case. The Making a Murderer was an introduction to this for Rich, but he was really starting to branch out and look at other things and other places to research and people that needed help.
Absolutely. And Making a Murderer, whilst it's kind of like the leading case that sort of drives us in a sense, it's really the litmus test towards the whole issue of people, what I call owning democracy. If we subscribe to the view that democracy is a good thing, it only is good if we participate. And to participate, you have to have a voice, but you have to have a respectful, thoughtful, constructed voice, not a ranting voice that is just out to, if you like, vet your emotions, your emotions. So, you know, I know people in, you know, who've seen what's gone on in Making Murder, and if we can just set aside the specifics of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, who've looked at the problems with the criminal justice system in the US and said, you know, we need to be thinking about these things at a much deeper level, in addition to the specifics of Stephen and Brendan, but at a much deeper level about, you know, justice anywhere, justice systems anywhere. And you know, like, I'm from Australia, but and we don't have a perfect system, and so there's much to learn from what I see as weaknesses in the US about understanding how that might be replicated, and I'm not aware of it in Australia and other countries. So, and you know, issues like forensic science matters that we've seen, you know, being debunked by just junk science, as it's called. It's this whole process of speaking out has enabled a whole array of knowledge to be opened up to us all. And in I'll use Millbilly as an example, developed such acute and demonstrable investigative skills that can be used in anything in life, right? Let alone the specific matters that he's doing. And this, you can find a genesis for all this back to people like Richard McAdam. And that's why the more people that speak out about things thoughtfully, respectfully, and with research, the better it is for us all.
The people that first started in this on YouTube, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of searches case every single day. It's just a handful of people that decide to use YouTube as their platform. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, Instagram.
Yep.
Most of them have moved on to other things, which is great. And like, for instance, Perplex QT, Koze, Casey Oliver, Martinez. I mean, there's I'll play, Ducky, a lot of them, but it seems like the majority of them have moved on to other things. Unlike anyone that's dedicated to case. And I've been venturing out in other avenues, other cases. I just kind of stay focused on one thing.
Yeah, it's a lot to absorb, and you know, adding other cases is something that obviously does and will happen, but keeping focused on a particular one, particularly a big one like Stephen and Brendan's, is a big task all in its own right. And so it's a balance between your time and your abilities. But, you know, it's people like you, Millbilly, and Richard and others that you go, well, look what the work they're doing. This just inspires people like me to keep doing the stuff that whatever I can contribute to the process. We do get a better society the more we participate in the things that we know about right and wrong. We get frustrated, we get some differences of opinion, but in the end, we get a better society. And the sorts of things that, and technology these days, social media these days, provided it's done well, actually restores more democracy to more people than the old system where you just read about stuff on the news or in the locally controlled newspaper. So, but you've got to use it wisely. You can't use it recklessly. And I'm really encouraged by what I see out there. And, you know, Richard was, for me, the really big advocate of having a respectful voice. I noticed on you're wearing a cap that actually has that byline on there. Let's hear your voice, or I think that's what it says.
Yes.
So that's
Your voice. I received a sticker.
Yep.
A button. Was a group. And
yeah, that's one.
this was sent to me by Greg and Sherry. I'm very grateful. Was shocked. Wasn't expecting this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's
I'm not shocked at all. Those two
No.
are they're awesome people, and they're in a precarious position where, although they weren't as much a part of it, they heard Rich talk about everything in the case, and you know, about his life involving the case. But and Sherry has been, you know, trying to keep this going for Rich, for the community, ever since his passing. And I knew she would never quit. She was gonna find a way to keep everything going. You know, we had the situation where the server ended up being shut down accidentally. That was detrimental. But I'm glad that you guys found a different way instead of keeping on worrying about that. It's move forward. He can be remembered in such a different way, and keep that catalyst that he helped start going.
correct. Yes, very much so. And it's where you take something to that matters, not so much where you've come from. That's not to forget the past. That's important. But it's what you do for the future that really matters. And this is a meaningful way that we can continue with Richard's legacy.
Well, and just speaking on that, how you said, you know, looking into the future, that's one thing for me that I've dealt with. I've dealt with some I guess issues regarding looking at Making a Murder. We're on the tail end where this already happened to Stephen and Brendan, and we're seeing the after effects of bad investigations. And you know, I don't know if I dare say corrupt DAs. I could. I mean, we don't really know for sure. We suspect that, but my thing now would be how can something like this push to where this may be able to help people get help before they end up in prison, or get help while they're going through their case. And that's where the investigative journalism part of this comes in, with people like Millbilly Rich. You know, all of them. There's a ton of them out there, but investigating before people actually end up in prison, I don't know how people could get involved that way.
I think I've always said, perhaps to friends, but also to myself, that whilst my priorities are on getting Stephen and Brendan home, I'm not going to be totally satisfied unless we get some genuine law reform to create the change that would have at least mitigated the likelihood of what happened. And then you might say, well, what law reforms would you want to see? There are many, of course, but there are a few that could really make a huge difference. One of those being that all police interviews are voice and video recorded, and that's one point. That secondly, that any people under the age of 18 be not allowed to waive Miranda rights. In other words, they must have an independent lawyer or lawyer's advocate, not family, I should say, because they don't have the knowledge to know what to do. So they must have an independent lawyer or maybe an advocate that's actually appointed for that, an office of advocates that's actually there for that purpose. They must have them present, otherwise you can't conduct an interview. And the third thing that I would do is that put back in prosecutorial or take away prosecutorial immunity, right?
On the prosecutor immunity, there's a case in Michigan that just got seen, and the law enforcement have been found guilty of that and same thing. So now there's a case on the books that somebody can reference in the future. I'll put a link to the lawyer that talks about that. It's a guy called Steve Lato on YouTube from Michigan. People send him cases all over the world, and he talks about them. Very interesting. He's a lemon law lawyer.
Okay, that's good. Well, I mean, it's a foundation thing in the human condition. If we think there are consequences to embarking on certain behavior, we generally take heed of that. One of the reasons when the speed sign, I'll use the US example, says 70 miles an hour on the freeway, one of the reasons you don't drive at 100 or 110 or 120 is because there's potential consequences if you do, let alone the safety of people. But, you can be caught, arrested if you cause an accident, even be criminally culpable for the consequences of that. They are consequential to taking an action. When prosecutors generally don't feel any consequences for behaving improperly, then that leads to speeding cars on the freeway, right? Mm-hmm. If there was no speed limit, we're all in danger when there are no rules. And if the prosecutor is an ethical, honest, and well-intended person, that he or she should be happy to abide by a set of rules. And they should also be happy to admit that they made a mistake if it was a genuine mistake, and not feel that they have to keep defending a mistake. Unfortunately, in Stephen and Brendan's case, the issues here surround improper conduct. So not are they just, they're holding back on this issue because of the consequences to themselves, or the potential consequences to themselves. So just those three rules: prosecutorial immunity issues, not waiving Miranda rights for juveniles, and ensuring that all police interviews that are going to be relied upon should be interviewed and should be recorded and videotaped, audio recorded and videotaped. Just put those three simple things as a standard, best practice thing in criminal justice systems across everywhere, and you watch the level of this crazy prosecution process diminish dramatically. Won't eliminate it completely, but it'll go a long way to making a whole lot better.
Yeah, that right there will take away their complacency with the way the system is currently.
And if the consequences are of being convicted of improper conduct as a prosecutor, you lose, let's say, your pension, right? You watch people be cautious and careful. That's what I'm saying. You need consequences for your actions, and if you're not willing to get in the business of being responsible for your actions, don't join law enforcement, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's very good points, because that is a problem throughout the U.S. that we see, even within our government, is, even if they do bad things in our higher up government, there's no repercussions for what they do. If they're forced to retire, they don't go to jail. They're here, retire, you're going to get your pension. Well, they got rewarded for doing bad things, really.
Exactly. And there's way, 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 way too many people in US prisons already. The whole industry of prisons needs to be relooked at. Yep. Too many. I'm not suggesting people who do bad things shouldn't be punished, but the types of penalties need to be appropriate for the crime. And a lot of especially incarceration isn't the solution to everything, put it that way.
Well, speaking of the prison system, Joe Biden just signed an executive order that stopping the privatized system funding
Yes, I saw that, which is interesting.
Yep.
You know, prisons, when you have a privatized system, they want customers, right?
Yep.
Customers.
The more
And
people
they're
they
prisoners.
house, the more money they get from the federal government. Like they were
There's,
about to lift the mask mandate here in Wisconsin until
yep,
they realized, oh, if we do that, we're not going to get the $50 million from the federal government no more. So no, we're going to keep the masks. It's all about money,
exactly.
and
One,
this
there,
I don't know. This COVID has destroyed this country. So many people have lost their jobs. They lost everything. It's tragic.
and it shouldn't be that way in a wealthy country like the United States.
I just don't see how a virus makes it into prisons.
Well, it makes it into prisons because it's brought in by prison officers, right?
Yes.
It wasn't taken seriously enough
Not
at the
here.
beginning,
Not here, no, not at all.
and that, you know, we know from experience around the world, if you don't take this seriously, it just takes one you know, infected person to create a sea of problems,
Yep.
right? And in part of where the US is at, and Great Britain as well, for that matter, and many other countries, is based upon not taking the problem serious enough at the beginning. And anyway, to me, you know, I'll give you an example. Sorry, I rabbit on about this a fair bit, but yeah, the level of incarceration in the US is the highest rate in the whole of the world, including countries like Russia and China and what have you. It's 5 times the rate per head of population than it is in Australia or Great Britain. You can't tell me that Americans are 5 times more criminal in their behavior than they are in Australia. It can't be true. What happens is that people get arrested and incarcerated for the most menial things, and they shouldn't be done that. I'm not talking about sort of, what's the expression, you know, those repetitive offenders. You know, obviously serious crimes do need to be incarcerated.
Well,
you know, people who abuse or hold the court system in contempt do need to be incarcerated, but
there's
general people should not be incarcerated.
no, but there's people that go in there with low-level offenses, and then they commit some kind of horrendous thing in prison, and then they're stuck there. Then,
Yeah, well,
like the prison system should be there to help rehabilitate people to come back on the streets.
correct.
Yes.
But there's no meaningful work in most prisons for people to do anything. They sit around looking at each other. You know,
Well, one of the things that what you're saying there, Mark, is very true. One of the things that America is actually lacking these days now is people in the trades. You can't get workers. You can't get young people to go into trade jobs. If they were training people in prison to do HVAC and plumbing and electrical, you would have a better chance of those people actually being rehabilitated, but they don't do that here.
Well, that's because majority of the high schools they drop the trade schooling in their schools, and you have to go to a specialized school now to do that.
Yes, but if you think about it, you have people in prison for longer periods than most people go to school. They
Correct.
can actually probably come out of there as a master electrician.
Oh,
Not that they get licensed right away.
A lot of these people that have been wrongly convicted and then released have gone on to become lawyers.
Yeah, but just generally, the general prison population, no one's born a criminal. Let's start from that basic position.
No, nobody is.
Circumstances. Correct.
When
no one wants to be in there.
When you're put in a position where you have to do something to survive, you're gonna do whatever you can, especially if you're doing it for your kids.
Correct. So that comes back to the argument about equity.
Some people can't control their situation.
No, but a nation has the ability, it's not going to, and it shouldn't try to solve all the problems, but it does have the ability to provide an equitable allocation of resources. So the basis, the foundation issues of living, such as a living wage, affordable housing, healthcare, and issues like, you know, a sustainable environment, that's all we all need as human beings
Well,
to survive. But you
it's-
can't create an environment where, as soon as you create an environment where people have to behave like the animal kingdom, that is survival of the fittest, they will.
Okay.
That's what
Uh,
they'll do.
well, can I get your thoughts on this GameStop situation?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, the GameStop situation is really just an example of a financial economic example of people not wanting to put up with the, excuse the expression, the BS that goes on in financial markets by the big players, right? That's in its simplest form.
Hmm.
And I admire them for what they're doing, right? Uh, it's not sustainable long
Well,
term, but
it's
I admire
funny.
what they're doing.
It's funny that they've moved on to different stocks too now. Bed Bath
It's just,
Beyond. I mean,
You
but
know, really,
they
to me,
no,
that what
were
happened there.
they were short selling Elon Musk company, and look what happened. He came out on top.
exactly. That sort of trading behavior should not be permitted, in my view.
Well,
Um,
it's
um,
everybody now is aware of what goes on
yeah.
for sure.
But there's some of the bigger issues. But I mean, it's a generational change,
But
and
it,
you know, one of the things I was inspired to see in the last presidential election was the fact that so many people came out and voted. But we
yes,
still have 40% of the eligible voting population sitting at home on their hands.
yep,
That is not democracy in action. If you don't participate, you end up getting the government you deserve, right? And when leaders, doesn't matter what your political persuasion
well,
is, when leaders know
well,
they only have to speak to 60% of the
now
population and
just
only get half of them.
okay. Now that trickles all the way down to judges when they get voted in, and then sheriffs. Half the population turns out in these counties. So, and not to mention half the time these judges or sheriffs don't have anybody running against them.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Mark Wiegert won the sheriff's position in Calumet County a couple of years ago with about 2,000 people voting for him,
uh-huh.
roughly.
Oh yeah,
In a county that must have, by my guess, about 20,000 eligible or 25,000 eligible voters. I mean, that's disgraceful.
Yep.
You know.
It is, but one of the things that I think caused that is the fact that the voting system hasn't been trusted beyond this year. It hasn't been trusted for years, and a lot of people just figure, why bother? Because they're going to do what they want to do, or this person's going to get elected, no matter if you like it or not. That's some of the mentality here in the U.S. Really.
But Jamie, politicians, particularly the selfish ones, rely on that apathy in the way
Yep.
they conduct themselves. So you can become president of the United States of America, clearly the most wealthy and powerful country in the world, by appealing to only 30% of your population, right?
Yep.
That is half of 60%.
Yep.
If you've got that other 40% voting, those candidates, whoever they are, have to start thinking about everyone. What have I got to say to appeal to a wider audience? And then you end up with a more equitable society, because policies are driven by the need of everyone, just not the true believers, no matter what the side of the politics are.
I wonder how many people actually wrote in Kanye West.
Oh, God. Well, I hope not many. With due respect to Mr. West, who's entitled to do what he wants to do, I hope the thoughtful people didn't really give him many votes. So
surprisingly, I know in Minnesota, he actually got a surprising number. I don't remember what it was right now, but I was amazed that I'm like, wow, that many people voted for him. But it also leads to the fact that a lot of people in the U.S. They want something different than the normal politicians, because the normal politicians are what are not trusted in this country now.
Because it becomes adversarial.
Yeah.
Let's face it, whether you're Democratic or Republican, just forget the tags for a moment, there are probably 80% of policies that both sides would have that are found at a foundation level each party would agree with. And it's only on the margins that they might have something a bit more radical one way or the other. why don't they get together and agree on the foundation issues as a collective rather than have to oppose everything that the other side says? You know, they're supposed to be representing all the electorate. If you get elected as a Republican member of the Senate or the Congress, you're supposed to be representing everyone, just not the people who voted for you.
Yeah.
And most of the things that we want in a wealthy Western society, we should have a right to expect, and they should get together on things like, you know, more equity in society, a better healthcare system, you know, dealing with issues of the environment and COVID and so on. They shouldn't be up to party politics. That should just be being a good human being, being a good American citizen.
Absolutely.
They should not be the adversarial system on issues like that. Okay, argue on the fringe if you think, you know, such and such and such and such, that's fine. But there is so much adversarial politics, you know, you just don't get a good outcome for the nation as a whole.
Yeah. Yep. They've created their own division, really, is what's happened.
And they're using that for political purposes.
Yep.
You know, that's what they're using, divisive politics for political purposes. That is so wrong and such a stain on a democratic society to do that. Now, a lot of people do that. I'm not just blaming Americans for that.
Oh no.
But the truth about that is it's not good for us all. You know, and you know, so that's what, and the only way that changes is participation. And it'll fundamentally change it from the young people, because older people get locked into their way of thinking. It's hard for them to change. But if you get a groundswell of, you know, 18 to 30-year-olds really pushing a particular banner, and they actually exercise that view through the ballot box, you watch the leaders start listening to that group, and then you will get meaningful change. It might take a generation or more, but you'll get it. But it's got to start at that level, and be encouraged by the older people, right? The older members of society.
Yeah.
You know, those younger people are the ones who are going to be our leaders in 10 and 15 and 20 years' time. We don't want them to just be shadows or mirrors of the older guys.
Yeah. No, that's 100% correct.
Yeah. And so if you get people who want to have their voice heard in a respectful, thoughtful way and talk about it, to take this back to the foundation matter, Richard's Foundation, well, then that's our small but meaningful way of making a contribution to that change.
And so is the website in the store, is that open now for purchasing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. It's all open and active. So all the W's, trmaf.org, O-R-G. So.
No, I was very happy to hear about this. Millbilly actually brought this up to me today because I hadn't heard anything of it. I've been a little bit out of the community here for a while. Took a good break, and it was good for the I don't want to say soul searching, but it was good for the mind at the least. Yeah.
You know, we welcome all views. I mean, we don't have to have people agree with us to like them. I don't mind if I quite welcome an alternative view. It gives you a basis to discuss things. But alternative views, as should be our own view, should be substantiated with knowledge and research. And if you don't know something, say you don't know something and go and find out. Don't pretend that you're an expert on something you know nothing about. It's embarrassing.
I'm not expert on anything.
Yeah.
So do you see this growing into? Do you see this growing or morphing into something bigger? Is that I kind of it's kind of a loaded question, but I kind of see it going that way.
Well, it has the potential to do that, but that's not what's on our mind. We want to, if you like, it's baby steps. See where we can take it, see how it works, what needs to be improved or changed. But imagine if 5 years from now we were talking that we've got 100 people out there or more on YouTube land here, letting their voice be heard.
More voices, the better.
Correct. Provided it's done in a respectful, thoughtful, caring way. I actually had, I won't go into the detail because it'll disclose something I shouldn't, but I had a dialogue with a for want of a better term, a guilter today about something, who wrote to me, very direct, very kind of to the point, no hello, thank you or anything. And I wrote back and I said, dear such and such, I really appreciate you giving me your opinion, and we like to hear all views. Kind regards, me. Or me.
Yep.
And shortly thereafter, he wrote back and said, I really appreciate your responding to me. I'm concerned about this and blah, 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 and this and this and this. And the whole tone of how he communicated came down to a more conciliatory and thoughtful tone. So I wrote back to him straight away and said, I really appreciate your follow up, blah, 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 blah. And suddenly this dialogue takes on a respectful form. Wasn't trying to convince him one way or the other about his views, but I wanted him to see that I'm not the enemy. I'm just someone who cares just as much as he does about the issue he was talking about. So, and that's what we can do. And that's what Richard did, right? And it's very easy to do that. When I say it's easy, with guidance, it's easy to do. And that's the way we should be always conducting ourselves. And interestingly, just to add to that story, is that I actually am I forget what the title is. I'm an administrator on one of the MAM websites, Facebook pages, sorry. So I get to see the number of people in the last year that are joining these, Facebook pages, Facebook groups for MAM is just phenomenal. I would be approving, just because I'm a kind of, my phone's always with me, on this particular site, which that I'm associated with as an administrator or moderator, whatever I might call it, is not by any sense the largest one around. I would be easily approving 15 or 20 people a day wanting to join this the MAM story. I think that may have generated out of COVID and people getting to watch Netflix more and more. But it's taken on another lease of life in terms of interest. And they're the people we want to, communicate these messages to as well.
Yeah, the bad thing that I've seen, now granted for me it's been, I know some people have been in it longer than me, but for me it's roughly about 4 years. The biggest thing that I found that, as you were talking about this conversation that you had with this person, is that you've had more people come in after watching it, and especially it being fresh on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
They start to debate out of emotion instead of logic.
Correct.
And that is really what has caused, to me, most of the problems as far as debating this stuff, is the emotions involved over anything. And once you get away from that, the emotional part of seeing what happened, either side that you're on, because everybody, their perception is different. If you've got somebody, if you want to say a guilter.
Speaking of perception, Jamie, I don't know if you've been away for a while, but there's this YouTuber, I don't remember his name. Do you recall the Stephen Avery Jody phone call where Barb is leaving?
Yes.
Well, he claims that he hears, oh
yeah, God,
she's breathing again. Yeah, he thinks when he says, oh, she's leaving again, he thinks he's saying, oh, she's breathing again. And then when she says, oh, yep, she's gone, that's him saying that Teresa.
I did watch that video, and as much as
no, another thing, he deleted the first one he made, and then he made another one. Everybody turned his comments off, so I made a video. And if he makes another video, make another video too. Unless he turns his comments on.
Yeah. No, and my point to that though was just perception and emotion. That's caused a lot of where people can't have useful dialogue within this. Like you said, Mark, you weren't trying to sway him one way or the other, but you had a useful dialogue.
Yeah. Well, one must be able to listen to understand, rather than just listen to respond.
Yep.
Otherwise, you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah.
No, and you start with the proposition that everyone's entitled to their own view. That's one proposition. Secondly, that everyone's entitled to be expect respect and courtesy in the dialogue that might flow from that. And I think, except with a few lunatics that might exist in society from time to time, pretty much everyone wants what's fair. It's just the perception of what's fair can be different. But if you start with the proposition that let's just try to get the truth is fairness, the real truth is fairness, then it's just a question of how you walk your way to the truth. If we take the Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey, and Teresa Halbach matter, no one likes what's happened in this matter to any of those three people at all. We just want to get to the truth. And the truth hasn't yet had its proper day in court. It's had some days, but not its proper day. Yeah. And if you believe that Stephen and Brendan are guilty, and that's perfectly someone's right to believe that, whether it's based on anything of substance, that's a different matter. But if you believe they're guilty, you should not be fearing another trial wherein newly discovered evidence can be introduced and debated. Because what are you after? You're after the truth. And justice review is part of the justice system. It's not a bonus, it's part of the system. Because guess what? Courts don't always, and juries don't always get it right, and that's why we have review processes. So you shouldn't fear review.
I just don't understand why they grant access to something you can't test because it's gone, and then they deny her to test something that she could test.
Yeah, I mean, all that, in my view, there's a piece of reform. Why should it be arbitrarily at the hands of the Attorney General's Department as to what evidence you give over for testing? Really, evidence is evidence. It should be available. All of it should be available. Provided
all the audio that we have from Manitowoc was obtained within 1 hour time frame. Dave Remaker is being he's on the stand talking to Buting. He mentions the audio. Buting's like, "Can we get this audio?" And he was like, "Yes." So during the recess, somebody from the sheriff's department ran over 2 discs with the audio on there. Well, I've come to find out that there's 3 dispatch lines, but we only have audio for 2 of them. And the dispatch number that is missing was given out in the paper. So the public's seen that number. So the public was calling that number. We have no audio from it. Huge problem. We only have the audio that involved Remaker. So he obviously had somebody gather just the days that he was requesting. So, but I guess it's gone. Good problem. Or it's locked away in someone's safe.
Well,
it's deserving of the question as to where is it. Sorry, Jamie, I talked on top of you. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that, you bring up a good point about the Attorney General and how they arbitrarily make these decisions. One of the things that I look through as far as the court system, and I've said this before, the court system in the U.S. to me it's more a theatrics is the way I guess I like to say it.
Yes.
And the reason being that I say it that way is this is one, this case, all the stuff that we saw, when people are not allowed to fully explain themselves, it's they want yes or no answers so they can short them, so to speak. That's a problem. If some, when we look at Deb Kakich was not allowed to speak, why?
Well, she spoke. The jury just didn't hear it.
And I get that, but that's part of the theatrics is where I'm going with this, is that, and it's not just this case. It's many cases where the DA and the attorneys and the judges are playing theatrics when, they're not allowing people to elaborate on their answers. To me, that's a joke. I mean, you should.
When you give your oath, when you're giving testimony, you give an oath, right? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's the oath given in Australia. Is that the same in the US? I'm not sure. But the whole truth is not yes and no, right? The whole truth is what you need to say to answer the question, right? So if I was a witness on a stand and if the prosecutor asked me, or whoever asked me, yes or no, did Mr. Hart do this or that, I would, if yes or no didn't properly answer the question, I would say to the judge, I'm sorry, Judge, I can't answer that question, and honor my oath to tell the whole truth with just a yes or no answer. That's how I would deal with it, right? Because otherwise they're giving you the answer as well as the question, at least only two choices. And I'm sorry, the whole truth isn't as binary as that. It's about a whole lot of other stuff. Now, you don't want people raving on, and sure, you can contain that. But to constrain them telling the whole truth is yet another flaw in the system. And just I'm slightly going to the side, but we talk about law reform. These issues about what do you call it? Plea deals, right? Where something like only 3% of all criminal cases ever find a day in court because the court system can't handle them all. So they give plea deals to usually not very well informed victims, saying, oh, you're going to get 20 years for that, but if you plead guilty, we'll give you 5 or 7 or 9 or something. And they say, oh, well, geez, that's better than 20. I'll plead guilty. I mean, that is just a formula for wrongful convictions. Another little supply of prisoners to the business prison system.
Yeah.
And in Stephen's case, where you don't get parole if you plead not guilty, that's just another formula for wrongful convictions. Fortunately, in Stephen's case, he's strong enough to say, I'm not doing that. Yeah. But many people will be aware of that, and they'll go, well, I better plead guilty, otherwise I'll never get out. All that sort of behavior, structural behavior, has to change by legislation where there are consequences to those things. And that's one of the other areas. Also, including American, it might be true here, and I'm just not as familiar, but constantly punishing people. The punishment for committing a crime in a criminal act is meant to be prison. They constantly punish them to the day they die, even once they're out of prison.
I think
right?
we need Brendan to voice his voice, some way, somehow. Because all we ever hear is a confession. That's all everybody ever hears.
Yeah.
I mean,
but why should if
you've been on plenty of podcasts, like with Michael Flom, where they call in.
Yeah. Jason Flom, yeah.
Need more things like that to happen.
I agree. But if you get convicted, let's just pick a simple thing. Let's just say you get convicted of a drug offence. And let's say you're a repetitive offender, so incarceration might be the only option left, because it shouldn't be the first option if it's your first offence. And you serve your time, whatever the time is, and you get out. That should be the end of the punishment. Why should you have this record that means you can't vote, that you can't have a passport, that all these other things?
That's supposed to deter people from doing the illegal activity.
It doesn't.
In the first place. I know.
It doesn't. You're just rendering that person a prisoner for the entirety of their life. It's just morally wrong.
Yep.
Well,
might as well take them out the back and shoot them, right?
The big part of the problem with that, to me, is the fact that and just using the drug offenses as the basis here, is that until they actually truly look at that as a sickness instead of a crime, it's not going to get fixed.
Yeah. So anyway, they're bigger issues that are harder to solve. But if you can solve some of those earlier ones we spoke of, you're on the road. And usually, like most things, when you're looking to climb a high hill, you just take it step by step. And once you get a third of the way up, you think, I could probably go a bit further. But if you make all your decisions at the bottom and they all have to be perfect before you even commence the climb, you never will. And so when it comes to criminal justice reform, there are some base camp steps that need to be taken unilaterally. In other words, with the consent of everyone across politics, or most of the thinking people. And then you'll get a better justice system, and a healthy and equitable justice system is one of the foundation elements to a successful society, like affordable wage, like a healthcare system. we all either directly or indirectly will come in touch with the justice system at some part of our lives. Hopefully not in a criminal sense, but we will, or we'll have people. And we want that system to work for us, not to work against us. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that you had said, Mark, that, you know, it wasn't, don't think I'm taking this out of a bad context, but when you said thinking people,
yeah,
one of the things that when you say that, I look at the U.S. here, and they look at, I think when you say thinking people, lawyers, judges, whatnot,
I'm actually referring to, Jamie, I'm referring to anyone who cares to look at an issue and not just respond to someone else's opinion.
Okay.
That's what I call thinking people, people who bother to think about something, not just respond to something. That can be everyday folk, right? Just as much as anyone else.
I had that
everybody that's watching my channel, you guys watched the documentary.
Correct.
And then you wanted to know more.
Yep.
It just depends on how far you want to get. There's a lot of learning stuff.
Yep.
I had actually had that reversed the way you said it was the correct way I was going to go about it, but I was thinking differently, because I look at those people that are upwards of judges, lawyers, stuff like that. They believe that they're always right, and it's all based on books. Whereas, as you had said, thinking people, we tend to look at the logic of it. The court system and the judges and lawyers, they don't look at the logic. They look at what they can turn into something that looks logical.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had that reverse there, so to speak, of what you were saying.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is that in the criminal justice system, there are, I would say probably, I don't know the number, I'm making this up, but I would say there's at least 80 to 90% of the people who are participants in that, be they direct officers or court people or whatever, who try to do the right thing, right? They mightn't get it right all the time, but it only takes those handful of rotten apples in the barrel to ruin the whole thing, right? So they're the ones you want to root out of the system and get out through consequences, just like I would in my financial advice profession. The baddies, the ones who do the wrong thing, have an impact on our industry and on people's confidence in our industry. I want them out. I want them prosecuted. And if I was to do something bad, I should be prosecuted, right?
Majority of these people seem to just rise in rank.
Yeah, because they're having, that's how they cover their backsides.
Because they're rewarded for what they've done instead of punished for it.
Correct.
The corruption is.
Well, the U.S. is, you know, if you look back in the day, I mean, the mob and the mafia had more power than many of the people in our government. You know, doing all these criminal activities, and they were overlooked because the good guys are supposed to be good guys were paid off. You know, that's how this system has actually grown to a point where it's really tough to reverse it now in many ways.
Yes. You can do it though, but it's got to start with the people. And it's got to start with the people participating in democracy, whether it's at local elections or state elections or governor or presidential or whatever congressional elections. Get out there and vote. And that's what starts that process along. You know, I say that with some degree of, by the way, this is a rare model than common. That is, in Australia, it's compulsory to vote. You have to vote. And if you don't, you get fined. Now, you can have legitimate excuses not to vote that are accepted. So, but that process, by the way, results into about 97% of the voting population vote in every election in Australia, and it basically creates an accountability factor, and so we have a far more egalitarian and fair society in Australia I'm not saying a better society, although I probably would say that. But
Yeah,
all
yeah.
I'm saying is it's a fairer society than a lot of places, because governments have to listen to everyone. They can't just listen to their their voter base or their the people that they like or what have you. Now that's a compulsion into democracy, and probably a whole lot of American attitudes might be, oh, you can't tell us what to do. I'm thinking, well, why can't you? You tell us how fast we can drive on the road. You can tell us this and tell us that. Why isn't one of those types of things a valid thing for a government to tell you? Now, I'm not saying you do that. I'm not. All I'm saying to you is, if you end up with a high level of voting outcome, you get a better and more equitable society. That's my opinion.
No, I actually agree with that. I mean, if the problem that we see in the U.S. is, I would say more so with employers, because the U.S. is a very, we're trained in school to be workers, and if you're missing work, it's a problem,
Jamie,
and
that's an interesting point in its own right. Forgive me for interrupting, but in my country, all voting is conducted on a Saturday, right? There's no midweek voting. There's no kind of little subtle pressure about employers letting you off to go and vote.
We had early voting.
Yeah, we have early voting too, absentee voting and early voting, right? But there's no issue for employers about letting people off to vote. It's because it all happens on a Saturday. Every election, no matter what it is.
But that actually tied right into what you were talking about, as far as saying you can't force me to. The way many people, I would vote whether it was a weekday or a weekend. It wouldn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But the problem is that people think that's my time on the weekends where I'm not working. A lot of people do view that as, no, that should be done during the business week. When business, that's the way they think. And
it's crazy. You think about it, 30 minutes maybe once every 4 years to have a say in your democracy as on a presidential level basis.
Yeah, it should not be a problem, but
it should be.
that
There are millions of people around the world who give their right arm to have the right to have a say in their government. You know,
absolutely.
And we call it democracy, but it only works if we participate in it. That's how it works. And that's the responsibility of a citizen, to participate in the democratic process.
Yeah.
And I don't speak that issue too loud, because I know Americans are very thingy about being told what to do. Well, I'm just saying, we accept other things that governments have a legitimate role to tell us what to do, because it's in the better overall interest that they do that, like speed limits on roads and, carrying a passport and all those sorts of rules. We accept that. Why? This is just another one of those things. If you care about your nation, well, if you don't want to make it compulsory, but you still care about your nation, get out there and vote. But guess what? 40%, that's a large number. I think the number equates to something like about 100 million Americans who can vote, don't. It's somewhere of that size anyway. It might be quite right, but it's somewhere there. Yeah. That's not a healthy thing for a wealthy nation.
And where the difference is that people look at it as laws versus constitution. Those are two separate situations, as far as, like you were saying. Well, you can tell us to do this with speed limits and whatnot. The Constitution and laws, especially being that we have federal laws, then you have state laws.
Yes.
That really, now you throw three different sectors into that kind of creates that problem for the voting system.
Yeah. Well, we in Australia, forgive me for keep mentioning the Australian example, but it's just my best example I can give you.
I'm jealous of you guys. So
we have one national body, a statutory authority that conducts all elections, right? Doesn't matter whether it's state or federal. It's called the Australian Electoral Commission. They control we don't have a system that you have to register for a party, by the way. You have a right to vote by virtue of being a citizen, and you're on an electoral roll. And whether you're voting for your local, we call it council, you call it county members, or a state politician or a federal politician, That Australian Electoral Commission, an independent body, is the one that conducts all those elections. So there's no issue of, kind of confusion. It's all done the same way every time. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And that brings up, some of the stuff that we've been dealing with here is that as far as the presidential election, my personal opinion, that should be done federally. But
Yes.
you've got your state and your county stuff that should be controlled by the state. Whereas right now, even the federal elections are controlled by the state, which leaves open those loopholes. So to
Yes,
speak.
and you have this bizarre situation where with the electoral college system, you start off with this foundation principle which most democratic nations have, one person, one vote. But when you finally get to the, say the state of California, and if you win the at the presidential election, if you win the popular vote there, you end up getting a disproportionate number of votes to those who actually voted for you. So the principle of one person, one vote immediately gets thrown out of the window. So you can have situations where a candidate may win the totality of popular vote but lose the election because they didn't win the votes in the colleges, if you like, that mattered in terms of numbers. Well, that's silly,
Yes and no. The only problem with that part there is if we did not follow the electoral college, the problem with that is me living in the Midwest, you would never have basically anybody that did not live in a big city or big state like say California, New York, Florida, all those bigger states.
Yes.
You would never ever see a change in the government because all the big cities would control everything for the smaller, or I shouldn't say, the bigger states would actually control everything for the smaller states. And you would never actually get away from that ever, just based on population.
Yep.
Yes.
That's why the whole electoral college is in place. It's got its faults though,
Yeah, we in Australia we have a similar system to you insofar as we have a House of Representatives and a Senate. I'm talking at the national level now, and the House of Representatives are elected popularly by the people, and within your own region, basically every 100,000 adult population get a representative, but then if you take that across the whole of the country and you bring into that point you're making, Jamie, you because Sydney is Australia is a highly urbanized country, you'd have this problem about states that have large big cities would get more control and more say. And to some degree that's true, but we have this moderating force that they have to deal with, and that is our Senate in Australia is proportionate to the number of states. So you get a certain number of members in the Senate just by being a state. And whilst the Senate is a house of review, it doesn't actually bring on legislation in its own right as a rule, even though it can. You get that the smaller states like the state of Tasmania that only has 400, I think 400,000 or 500,000 people in it at the most, which is a small state. It has a big say in the Senate in Australia, and therefore, guess what? The politicians have to appeal to everyone, not just the ones who do their bidding. Now, I'm not trying to sway you over to our system. Your system can work, and in fact, as I said a little earlier, that when people on the core issues, most people would agree on things that are good that need to be done for a nation, but to make core issues a divisive element of party politics is what's causing the problem. You can argue the fringe on matters, but in the center are the main issues that make America great, and have always have. Agree on that, whether you're Republican, Democratic, or Independent. Just agree on that and get on with it.
Yep.
And how to deal with COVID should have been one of those issues. It's about the health. COVID isn't discriminatory in terms of which party you belong to. It'll kill you no matter who you are if you're in the wrong set of circumstances. Why should that be a party political thing? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's the thing that needs to change.
Well, 2020 was crazy.
Yeah.
2021 didn't start out as a good start for here in the United States. Really, January 6th.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. 2021, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just, I can tell you from an outsider, I'm sure I reflect the views of many outsiders looking, and we just look back at that and go, oh my God, is that the United States that we love and respect? And we clearly understand that that's not a
Well,
representative
The thing
sample of
is,
Americans.
the funny thing is,
but
though, days before that, they released another stimulus check, so everybody got $600, and they probably used that money to go to the Capitol.
Yeah,
it's
that's possible, but I think a majority of the people went there to do it peacefully.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yes.
there were,
But everybody
there-
that breached that fence, guilty.
yes,
Whether
yes,
you,
the-
whether
the-
you, yeah, but that's overdone with.
well,
Yeah.
okay, so I'll bring this up, and this is the way some people look at it. I'm one of them. Now, threatening anybody in any way is not a good thing. But to me, that building, that's owned by the people. That was paid for by our backs, our ancestors' backs. They tend to treat that, and you see that by some of the things that people have said within our government. This is our temple.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
that's a temple that we paid for. They haven't paid anything really for it. They've actually gained a lot of money off the people's backs. Now, the way they went about that, getting in there, as far as damaging any property, that should never be done. And I've watched videos of people trying to stop that from happening, and some of them were Trump supporters, and some of them were Biden supporters that were saying, no, you can't be damaging this building. This is taxpayer property. When you have the government, though, that looks at this as their temple or something that is their right, that's where a lot of this stuff did happen. Or
Look,
we know it happened. So go ahead, Mark.
human beings, the difference between us and the animal kingdom is that we've rationalized that it's better to get on with each other generally than not to. And in a democratic society, we've taken that to a much higher and more refined level. But let me tell you that humans will behave badly if you create an environment where that happens. You either incite them, or you deprive them, or you encourage them to do things that are at a foundation level are fundamentally inhuman to do. And that can be as overt as something that happened at the Capitol for a good handful of people, or just the way you treat people in prison, or the number of people living rough in the streets of the United States in the big cities is just mind-boggling in my mind. Now, we have people like that in my country, as do most, but the level of it in the United States is unbelievable. That's not an example of a healthy society, and that gives rise to survival of the fittest mentalities. Now, I'm not trying to justify the behavior of the people in Washington. Clearly, I don't. But humans are fallible creatures, and one of the aspects of humanity and democracy is to care for everyone at some basic level. And you take away people's sort of desire or willingness or need to express themselves in that ridiculous way. Now, some of that, of course, is promoted by others who should know better. Now, I'm not here to point fingers at people, but all I'm just saying is that you need to have a fairer society, a more equitable, fairer society at the very basic level, and that's what a wealthy nation should be providing for its citizens. So you want to encourage enterprise and people who work hard and can earn a good living and do amazing things. You want to encourage that too, but we all need to live respectfully on planet Earth for planet Earth to work. And when you live in a wealthy society at a base level, a government should be able to create the opportunity for people to live respectfully. That to me is what I expect my government to do.
Yeah. No, you're dead on there, Mark.
I want to thank both
So-
of you for taking your time and coming on here with me.
Pleasure.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
It's great to
Bill,
talk
Billy-
to you guys. And
Yeah, you too, Jamie.
I'm very, very happy to see this. I know I've been very silent as far as Rich goes. It was I've dealt with a lot of death in my life, and I was getting closer and closer with Rich in the 4 years that I got to know him. It was traumatic for me, and I was actually surprised that somebody that I met through the internet that I would have that much of a close relationship with. So I'm glad to see this because he was very impactful in my life. He was a great friend, and I love seeing that this is actually taking off. And I know he was to you and many others. You know, I'm not trying to single myself out, but that was crushing. You know?
It also, Jamie, makes us realize how, as individual people, we can make a difference. You know, Rich was just this guy who needed to speak out, and he did so thoughtfully and professionally. We can all do that. It's not meant to be about a battle. It's about being heard respectfully. And I'm very grateful that he crossed my paths in my life, even though I'm much older than he was. I learned a lot from Richard, and I'll continue to learn from him. I'm sure that's a continuous thing for me for the years I have left.
Well, we've all got a lot of growing to do, and he's definitely helped us with that. So, you know, we actually got to see him grow over that 5-year period.
Yes.
5 or 6 now, probably.
And Billy, if I may, just if you don't mind, just if I could remind people, if they feel inclined to donate, and that's a personal thing, we would be really appreciative of that. I can assure everyone that the process is absolutely full of integrity and good intent, and if we can create some scholarships out of donations, that would be a wonderful outcome.
All right. Thank you both.
I'm definitely on board.
Thank you.
I was not sure if the site was live, as just hearing about it today, but now that I know it is, yeah, I'm definitely on board.
That's great. Well, thanks very much, Billy. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Hey, good to talk to you again, Mark.
Okay. All the best.
Good night.
Take care.
Okay. Bye now. Bye-bye.